Are Dave Canterbury's 5 C's of survival enough to actually keep you alive? So welcome back to the channel, everyone. So if you didn't catch it from that opening, we are going to talk about the 5 C's of survival, or the 5 C's of survivability taught by Dave Canterbury, part of his whole Pathfinder system. Now, if you've been a follower of mine for any length of time, I'm sure you've gathered that I used to be an instructor for that school and for him. So just a quick rundown, my experience within that system, school, everything. First took classes in 2018, 2020, became an instructor, left there a year and a half ago. So 3 years as an instructor, 2 years as a student, all in all 5 years total. So I have, hell, I couldn't even tell you how many hours of experience just teaching this from those 3 years. I think on average taught about 20 classes a year, so that's going to be about ballpark, what, 1,800, 2,000 hours of instruction alone. Not to mention all the courses I took leading up to that, my own study time, things like that, stuff I've learned before, things I've learned after. So I have tons of experience teaching the 5 C's of survival or survivability. Now, when you start looking at this concept, it's really meant to address some of your survival needs if you do find yourself in a situation like that. But this can be expanded out if you're practicing bushcraft, so forth and so on. So the 5 C's, we're having a cutting tool, combustion, cover, container, and cordage. And the thought process behind these are the hardest things to recreate off the landscape. Now, throughout my time instructing and as a student, I've created everything from those 5 categories off of the landscape. And I'll tell you straight up, it is a pain in the ass sometimes. Creating a container out of birch bark. I've also made it out of, I'm trying to think what else. I think I made it out of tulip poplar as well. Basically any kind of tree where you can separate the outer bark from the inner tree itself. Made pine pitch to seal that up. Made cordage out of various different plants. All those things are very, very time consuming. About the only thing I didn't really create was a cutting tool. My buddy Andrew Heath, who I've taken classes with, who I taught with, I know in his advanced class, they actually had to make a knife out of a file, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but the thought to keep in mind with that is it's a huge time investment, a huge calorie investment to create these things. So that's why we carry the 5 C's of survival or survivability. So what I want to touch on firstly is container, because there's a few different components to that. Something you want to kind of wrap your head around if you're just beginning to study this or trying to understand the concept. So obviously we got a pack here. Also got a little bag there as well. And these could be categorized as containers because they're containing items that we need when we're outdoors or on a trip or around town on a daily basis. It's carrying our essential items that we need for whatever we're doing. Let me pop this front panel open. Now, something else you can carry. So this here is just a little titanium bush pot from Evolve Supply Co., owned by Darwin on the Trail. I actually bought this one from him at a convention a few months back. So you could carry a little bush pot like this, stainless steel, aluminum, pick your fancy, run with it. I like titanium, it's a little lighter, but I like the heat transfer, basically heating up and cooling down a little bit more efficiently than stainless steel. And then this is just a titanium bottle and cup set that I bought off Amazon. I think over Christmas time for like 60 bucks, 40 bucks, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly. But it came with this little mesh stuff sack, I have a 32-ounce titanium bottle, cup, and then obviously a lid. Now there's stainless steel versions of these things, aluminum versions of these things, but again, I like the titanium because it heats up and cools down significantly faster than the stainless steel. Aluminum is going to have the best heat transfer than stainless steel or titanium. I just don't particularly like using aluminum a ton, and finding a decent aluminum bottle can be a bit of a challenge. You can find some pots fairly easy, but bottles a little bit more challenging. So that knocks out containers for us. There's loads of other containers. Obviously, Possible's pouch can be a container, Altoid's tin, you name it, whatever you're carrying something in, container. Second to that is a cutting tool. Now, this knife here is just a custom knife that I've had made for myself by a small time blade maker. I really like it because this is a design I like. It's a full flat grind, which is my preferred grind for a knife. Now, I know there's drawbacks to that, but we're not going to get into that video. But a good full tang knife is what you want. Nice fixed blade that's going to be nice and sturdy for anything that you may do. Have a 90-degree spine on it. Obviously, that's going to help with striking a ferro rod, lighting steel fire, processing bark off of a tree, those sorts of things. In addition to that, my knees are killing me here, we have a silky big boy. Now, if I get this damn thing open, this is the Outback version. And I'm not going to sit here, show you how to use a saw, use a knife, multi-tool, anything like that. But these are nice because you can process larger diameter pieces of wood. Generally, though, I carry the Gone Boy or the Pocket Boy more so than the Big Boy. This is more for winter time when I need to process down some firewood. I don't really buck up firewood, so even in the winter time, I don't carry an axe or a hatchet with me all too often. But that's something to consider in your kit if that's something you want to carry. I think the other thing that I have is I have my Leatherman sidekick. Now we're going to do a video talking about multi-tools versus SAKs, but I've carried this, hell, I don't know, I've had this for 7-8 years maybe. All I do is strop it a couple times a year and it's razor sharp. But tools, cutting tools, allow us to create further things out of the landscape. Now, what those particular tools are, whether that's a SAK or multi-tool, big chopper, smaller, fixed blade, a Puko, anything like that. I mean, that's all dealer's choice. And you learn that as you learn a concept, get out there, practice it, find what you like, what you don't like. You know, I know Scandi grinds are preached all throughout the survival and bushcraft community, but I found for me, the full flat grind or a flat grind in general just works a lot better for me. I feel a lot more comfortable with it. And at the end of the day, your cutting tools should be something that you are comfortable using for whatever task you're doing. All right, so let's talk about combustion. Now, obviously, my go-to all of the time, if I can, is a Bic lighter. Keep multiple in my kit, keep one in my pocket, so I always have one readily available. Alternatively, we can use things like ferro rods, matches, flint and steel kits, things like that to create fire. Obviously, off the landscape, we're going to make something like a bow drill or any other sort of primitive combustion methods. But let's talk about the lighter specifically. Now, there's a big misconception. I see it till this day online that people, oh, when a Bic is wet, it's useless. Well, you can get a Bic dry enough to work for you relatively quickly. I think the fastest I've ever seen a student get this done was maybe 10 seconds. So we would have them drop the lighters in a bucket, they pull it out, then they have to dry it out, and then start a fire with that. We'll go through that in a different video, but you can make these work even when they're wet. The biggest downfall, though, to the Bic is when it's cold outside. So if you have this sitting in your kit back at camp, come back, try to start a fire, you're going to have a hell of a time. You're going to need to warm up the bic. That's why I generally keep one in some of my innermost layers, so that's next to my body, staying warm. The thing also with the bic is the reason you get that spark is because there is a ferro rod in there. It's small, but there is a ferro rod in there. So you can really do a lot with just a bic lighter. Even if this runs out of fuel, you can still get a fire going with this. So that's always why the bic is my primary source for combustion, as I'm getting swarmed by bugs here, man. This is driving me nuts. But matches, usually follow it up. Some sort of stormproof matches. My go-to is Yuko, and obviously the ferro rod if I want to get all bushcrafty with it. Once in a while, I'll bust out the bow drill, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Sometimes just a pain in the ass depending on the environmental factors. Too wet, too humid, not the right wood, those sorts of things. So lastly, we have cover in cordage. I'm going to cover it all in one go here because I do have a little kit set up here that contains both of those. So this is just a Bushcraft Outfitters mess tarp. It's a 5x9 tarp, packs out nice and small and compact. Unfortunately, they went out of business last year, so these are pretty hard to find. When you do find them, people are usually charging a ridiculous amount. But I've had this one for a few years. Don't use it a ton, because mainly I just kind of keep it together as an emergency shelter. Weather turns on me, just need to get a quick shelter up for lunch or whatever I'm doing. But this is a nice sill nylon tarp, nothing fancy, no reflective surfaces. So with the 5Cs, what's generally recommended by Dave at the school is a reflective emergency blanket. And those definitely have their place. The problem you run into a lot of times with those is they're really meant to be just a one and done item. In those cases, I usually just carry like the smaller Mylar blankets, because then I can always attach those to whatever tarp or poncho or whatever shelter that I'm using. So I'm not saying it's wrong to carry those, but just understand the limitations that come along with that sort of tarp. Inside of here, I do have some cordage as well. So I just have it in this Volume Outdoors pouch here. And this is actually a ground cloth. So this gives me a secondary tarp if I need to, or something to put on the ground while I'm underneath my main emergency tarp. But I've really moved towards using this tactical cord. If you look around online, it's all it really is 2mm paracord. And what the difference between these and your standard 550 paracord is these have no inner strands. Now I know, but I can use the inner strands to sew something or this, that, and the other. In all honesty, and all of my time training, all of my time outdoors, I've rarely sat there and sewed something back up. Now, is that a possibility that you're going to need to do that? 100%. Prime example of that, when I took my first advanced class with Tony Powers, Jeff Carlson, and a couple other people. Within the first couple of hours, we got dropped off a couple of miles away, had to hike, navigate back to the school. We were sliding down a hill to get to a little bit lower ground to keep on going on the azimuth we were, and I tore the back pocket of my pants off. It's the funniest thing. So if you ever see Tony in person, ask him about the story, and the way he explains my face, he's like, man, I knew I was in control if I said anything. But needless to say, I just went the rest of that class with my ass hanging out. I could have put duct tape on it if I had that. I could have took the time to sew it back up. But for me, I was just like, whatever. It's just part of what I'm doing here. I'm trying to remember. I may have duct taped that up. I don't remember, to be completely honest with you. But very rarely did I ever use the inner strands of my paracord for anything. The problem with 550 paracord, what you find over time, is it stretches because of that outer sheath and those inner strands. So if you're using it for a bow drill, setting up shelters, over time that paracord is going to stretch just because of the way it's made and designed. So I like going to this more solid core cordage. You get minimal stretch to it, but I still get all of the versatility of paracord. Now you do lose some of the tensile strength with this smaller diameter solid core stuff, but I'm not suspending my body weight off this paracord. Hell, I'm not even doing that off a 550 paracord. So when it comes to cordage, figure out which ones you like using, which kind of best suit your needs, and then run with them there. Same with your cover. A 5x7 tarp of some variety, a poncho. I mean, that can have you covered in a variety of situations. The poncho is obviously going to double as rain gear if it starts raining on you, although I've always had mixed results with that. But those give you a lot of versatility wrapped up in some pretty small packages depending on what you're carrying. And you don't have to take the time to make them off the landscape, which can be very time consuming, especially for cordage. You're gonna need a lot of materials. It's gonna take a lot of time to collect that, process it, and make that cordage. So as I open the video, is Dave Canterbury's 5 C's of survivability or survival enough to keep you alive? Yeah, it is. It all depends though on one critical component, and that's gonna be your knowledge and experience. So as I stated earlier, I spent about 5 years within that school, learning, teaching, refining my own mindset and skill towards different techniques. So I've been able to learn at a really accelerated pace because of being able to teach. Now, with their instructor program, let me pull this up because I can't remember it verbatim. Don't need a fact checkers coming after me. Their instructor program, per their site, says the certification is meant to be an endorsement of the level of training you have completed to earn it. It does not mean you'll be selected to teach at the school, but the selection does come from that pool of people that are in that program. This course is designed to facilitate training you need to start your own affiliated school, but with a certification globally known and recognized survival school that can aid you in your training and your school validity that comes with it. So essentially what that means is you complete the instructor program, not guaranteed to become an instructor, but it trains you to the level of an instructor. And you don't have to be affiliated with them to teach that curriculum, those skills, anything. So with the 5 C's here, we can see that we can cover a lot of different bases. We don't have to make any of this stuff off the landscape, although practicing those skills does just add more tools to your toolbox. But I have always been of the mindset of, why am I going to put myself in a harder situation if I don't have to? So I carry the necessary tools and gear that I'm going to need for whatever I'm doing. If I'm going out for a day hike, I might carry something small like that Canteen Survival Kit video that I recently did. If I'm going out for a night or more, I'm going to have a more robust kit with me. Or if I plan to do certain things outdoors, I'm going to bring those tools with me. Obviously, I do photography and shoot videos, so I have camera equipment with me all the time, every time I go outdoors. So I have to take that into account when I'm selecting a backpack, what gear I'm bringing with me, because sometimes space can be limited depending on the pack. Video for another time. But like I said, the most critical thing to the 5 C's, 10 C's, which we'll do a video on, is your knowledge and your experience. You can take the courses, you can read the books, you can watch the videos and have the knowledge, but do you have the actual experience to put that into effect? You know, have you been doing this for a year, 2 years, or have you been doing this for 20? When I got into survival in the outdoors, I mean, I've always had an interest in it since I was a kid and watched Rambo and all those movies from the 80s that were badass. But it wasn't until I'd probably say about 15 years ago when I started getting more and more into it, reading more about it, reading about prepping it, and reading about different gear and all this stuff. And then obviously didn't really start taking classes till 2018, so relatively soon, but I was still getting outdoors and doing different things, gaining experience, saying, hey, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. You know, now I have 15, 20 years of experience, of knowledge gained to pass along to someone else. So that's something you also have to consider with whatever you're doing, taking a course, teaching someone, something like that. What's the experience level? What's the knowledge base? You know, did they just start doing this? Have they been doing this for a long time? All things you need to consider. But For you as the individual, once you have your gear in place, get outdoors, start practicing some of the things you're reading about, some of the things you're watching. Try building shelters off the landscape. Try making things off the landscape. You'll learn how difficult those can be and why carrying the right gear is extremely important. Let me know in the comment section down below what ways you've been studying survival skills, outdoor skills, whether that has something you've been taught since you were a kid, what movies you like to watch, what shows you like to watch, what books you like to read. I think what's fundamental with something like this is we share what's worked for us in the past, what's our like go-to resource, what might not have worked, so at least we can explore that and someone else can gain a little bit more knowledge off of that, because at the end of the day, that's all what we're trying to do is pass on knowledge, pass on our experience, so someone can take that piece of that, add that to their pot, and then go forth in their adventures. Do me a favor, hit like, share, and subscribe. That gets more eyes on the community that we're building here. Helps bring more people into our community so we can build a larger knowledge base to learn from each other and grow with each other. As always, this has been Paul with Adaptable Survival. Adapt your mind, your body, and your gear.